Lights, camera, action. Welcome to the Requel Podcast. The Requel Podcast is a podcast that was created as part of the Capes and Lunatics brand, where we're going to talk movies. We're going to talk, what we do is we take a film property and we discuss what would be better. Should we reboot this, do a soft reboot, make a sequel, make a prequel, or a requel? And if you're wondering what a requel is, well, sit back and listen and we'll tell you. Each week we have a special guest where we've decided on a film property or franchise, and we come up with options, ideas, and then what we do is we create our story and we pitch it to each other, and we decide which way we want to go, and then we let you guys also decide what your story would be. All right, welcome to the Southgate Media Group special podcast that is on our Patreon account. This is the Requel Podcast, and if you're like, what's a requel? Well, a requel is a term that's not used that often. It's a concept of when you do a sequel, but it's really kind of a reboot. The best examples I give for that is Jurassic World, where it's kind of like the same thing as the first film, but it's also technically a sequel, or Star Wars Episode 7. And I use that term because what we do on the podcast is we take a property and we talk about the property as it is, but then what we do is we decide, well, would I want to reboot this property? Would I make a sequel? Would I make a midquel? Is there certain sequels that I would cut out? What would I do if I was in charge of this property? And we just have a conversation. We pitch our story ideas. Pretty cool, pretty simple. But today I have a new guest that I haven't done on the podcast with. Maybe you're used to hearing his voice. He's been part of some of the Southgate Media Group movie reviews and the Capes and Lunatics I've been a part of. But I'll let him tell more about himself and his podcasting love. I have Mr. Jamie Burns. Go ahead, Jamie.
Hello there. How you doing there, Jonathan? It's nice to be invited onto this this reboot, redo, over.
Yeah, I mean, I just love the concept of like discussing like, the first episode we did, I tell people, is a good friend of mine. We pitched. He was a huge lover of the Christopher Nolan Batman films, and that's kind of what helped create our friendship. And so the first episode we did was, would we have done a sequel to The Dark Knight, or would we have done something in between would we have done a sequel to Dark Knight Rises, or would we have done a film in between? Mm-hmm. And I pitched my idea for the in-between film, and he pitched his idea for what he would have done after The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
So that's just a kind of example of how the show goes. And it's just kind of fun with these properties that have been rebooted or not rebooted. And you're kind of like, what can we do with them?
Yeah, there seems to be an awful lot of rebooting at the moment. But what gets me is that most of these reboots are of really good films that don't need a reboot. And I was thinking, there is some real... I wouldn't say... Well, there is some terrible films that had a really good premise. So why about redoing some of them crappy films, and sort of spruce them up a little bit? And I think, give them films a second chance because, for instance, they rebooted Poltergeist. Poltergeist was their classic. Didn't need rebooting, but they did, and it was a flop. You tell me. Grab. Oh, yeah. There's only a handful of reboots that I can think of that are a bit superior to the original, like The Thing, John Carpenter's Thing. Amazing reboot, and I have to admit, it made me. I thought that was the original until I went back and saw the original. I was like, "What?" But superior it is. It's like the Mummy films, the original Mummy films. Not the 1940s one. I mean, the ones with Brendan Fraser in. They were cracking, the first two. Cracking films. And they are technically a reboot from the original Mummy films from the 1940s. And then they got rebooted to a really crap film.
What's funny is that concept you're talking about right there, that's going to be our special episode in October. Ooh. Because we are... I started playing this board game with my kids called Horrified. It's basically it's a really great board game you're hunting down the Universal monsters.
Ooh.
So my friend got it, and then we played it, and then I loved it, and so I went and bought it. My kids have loved it, so they got really into the Universal monsters. And because of that, my wife and I, we went back and we watched the Brendan Fraser films, and we talked about how, you know what, they hold up pretty well.
They do.
There's this very thin line of horror and like action in the first one, and the second one's more action adventure and less horror.
Yeah.
And it's a very tight line, because then he tried to do that in Van Helsing, and it just did not work.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a whole nother podcast discussion where we break that down.
I enjoyed that film, funny enough. I liked it.
I like aspects of it. Like I said, that's going to be a whole conversation in itself, because it's one of those concepts I love. But then you're talking about the reboot with the Tom Cruise Mummy. And there are some cool things in there, but there's also some problems. And I bought that movie. I found the Blu-ray for $5.
Oh, bargain.
And my buddy, who I'm doing the monster stuff with, he's, technically medically deaf. So anytime I can find a film that I can get the subtitles to work, I'll we'll do it. That way he can watch it better with me. And so that was kind of like, I was like, $5. It wasn't, it's worth it for just the discussion point of like how this movie failed. And I think that's kind of the thing, is so many of these concepts, like you were talking about the film we're going to talk about today, I think kind of almost fits into that classic pulp. Like stories like just recently they announced that Taika Waititi is going to be doing Flash Gordon.
Yeah, they did.
And I'm like, okay, I think that could work, because he has a comical sense, and he doesn't take he understands the material, it seemed like, but he doesn't play it too realistic. But I think with that sensibility, you could make Flash Gordon work. I think if you tried to play it straight, it's going to flop. And we've seen that flop. And looking at recent films that were pulp inspired, John Carter, which was based off the John Carter of Mars, Tarzan, that was 2016.
Oh, there's been so many of them.
The most recent one that had Alexander Skarsgård, directed by David Yates. It's like those characters aren't the Lone Ranger. Also, those characters aren't resonating as well with audiences now. They're part of like this bygone era almost. And I won't even say the Green Hornet, because I feel like they just they could have made that an interesting property, but they just try to make it too campy and funny. Yeah. But then in the 90s, we had The Phantom, The Shadow.
The Shadow. Love that film.
And then what we're talking about today is The Rocketeer.
Yeah.
And I think The Shadow is an interesting concept that could be reworked, that would be maybe a future episode of the podcast. But the Rocketeer, I'll tell my history with the property, and I'll let you tell yours.
Okay.
I remember seeing it in theaters with my brother and my mom at this theater in Mississippi. It was one of the first theaters. It had, like, I don't want to, like, a dine-in aspect, but you could order food, and like the seats were like at a bar. Like, it was really neat. It was like a cafe inside type theater, so you could order food. And I remember my mom took us, so that was 92 for the first Rocketeer.
Yeah.
So I was 7.
God.
When it came out.
I think wasn't it 91? I think it was 91 actually. It depends when you get it to when we get it in the UK.
Right.
Yeah.
That is a big difference, because it feels like that window nowadays is a lot smaller. In like maybe a few weeks, but I feel like back in like the 90s, like that was a larger time gap between releases. But I just remember seeing it in the theater and I loved it. The score was amazing. I remember that, like, coming home and I had my old Ghostbuster Proton Pack toy, and I put it on upside down because the tops of it looked like they could be boosters.
Yeah.
And that was my Rocketeer pack. And I had some sort of like bicycle helmet. I had a little bit of a visor I put on, and I was outside pretending to be the Rocketeer.
Yeah.
And then that's just one of those movies that I think it's carried, and every so often you visit, and you're just like, oh man, this is so good. And that's my history with the property as is. Let you go ahead and talk about your history.
Back in 91, I was 21, and I just passed my driving test, and I always went to the cinema with my mum. My mum worked long hours in a bingo hall in the UK, and she'd often work afternoons and evenings. So whenever a day became free for her to come up, we'll go out to the cinema, and that's how we saw Star Wars, Ghostbusters, Gremlins, all them ones. And I just passed my test, and I said to my mum, "Do you fancy going to see The Rocketeer?" And she was like, yeah, I'll go see it. Now, as I was growing up, I was a really big fan of the King of the Rocketmen, King of the Rocketmen, very 1940s serial, little black and white series that used to be on the cinema, but you would get it like a weekly thing? You would go back to the cinema and see it, but we had it on the TV. So, every Saturday morning I was watching those because they played them back to back with the Flash Gordon, with Buster Crabbe playing Flash Gordon, and then King of the Rocketmen. And I was like, wow, I was totally sold. And then I think when the Amiga and the Atari ST was going, they brought out a game called Rocket Ranger. And I used to play that to death. And that was just like King of the Rocketmen. They took it, used that property sort of thing. So when they announced that this film was Rocketeer, and I remember seeing a trailer for it, and I was like, what? They'd made a film of the King of the Rocketmen? Because that's as far as I knew it was. I thought it was a direct, they took that property and redone it, called it The Rocketeer. I did not know it was based off a comic book at that time. So anyway, we paid our money and we went and seen it, and I was blown away with it. It had Rocket Man, it had Nazis, it had, it was pulp, it was set in 1940s. Oh man, it was everything. It was Art Deco. It looked beautiful. And like we were saying about The Shadow. The Shadow is one of my all-time favorite films. I love that film, but I like that era, if you know what I mean. You know what I mean? Funny enough, I was talking to my wife about getting a tattoo. I think it's time I had a tattoo. And I wanted a sleeve with The Rocketeer, Indiana Jones, and The Shadow, because they sort of all fit in that time period. And I think that all three of them would work together in that period, a film like a mashup film. So I loved it. And, going since then, oh God, I always wanted a sequel. I really wanted to see a sequel. And I remember back in the day, we used to have this film journalist on the BBC TV called Barry Norman, which you can search his old reviews. He's passed away now, but his old reviews of films from back in the day. And every year, his show was called Film 77, Film 78, Film, you get the gist as it goes up the years. And he had this as a review, and sort of this kind of thing didn't really tickle his fancy, but he liked this, and he said, I want to see a sequel to this film. He said it, and I was thinking, ooh, he's changed his tune. And I had to agree with him. And it is it's a fantastic adventure film. You know what I mean? And I know what we're going to be talking about, like rebooting it or making a sequel or something. It's one of those films that I would not want to see a reboot to. You know what I mean? Hand on heart, not a reboot. Oh, well, I don't know. It depends if they were going to keep it in the same time period, but we'll get on with that as we go along. Yeah,
I agree. And like I said, we'll get there. And, okay, so when I first saw it, of course, we didn't have the internet back then to kind of research. I didn't know it was based on a comic. I don't really remember when I discovered that it was based on a comic. And I have read some of the comics since then, just, finding them at my local library and everything. And I'm with you. I love the time period. There's something so classic about. Sometimes just it's nice to leave modern technology. You know, when they talk about like movies and screenwriting and everything, one of the first things you always have to figure out is how do you use or get rid of cell phones?
Yeah.
Like how many plots of older films can we fix with a cell phone?
Mm.
You know,
yeah.
So it's just those technology things that we have, and just that classic, like that 40s, you know, that clean aesthetic. I always love the 40s fashion, the cars. You know, you have the gangsters, you know, with the Tommy guns, like all that, you know, that 20s, 30s, 40s era cinematic stuff that is rolled into this. And like you said, even in the Indiana Jones, where it's got that slight, I don't want to say like B level, but it kind of like the sound effects and stuff they used in Indiana Jones for the punching and stuff. It's just like, yeah. And I think like
cereal,
said,
old cereal. It sounded like an old cereal.
It's just fun. Like it has that adventure to it. And I feel like, you know, as of this recording, I think a movie that I really want to watch with the kids is the Jungle Cruise movie. I've heard good things about it.
Just
and I feel like it. Did you?
Yeah.
I heard that it has that adventure feel to it. And I mean, I feel like the first Pirates of the Caribbean had that adventureness to the film. And I think sometimes adventure is a very hard place to put films. And I feel like the Rocketeer had that. That helmet is so classic. You know, the Rocketeer's outfit is just like pants, boots, a standard like jacket that Cliff is wearing. Yeah. And then that helmet is what makes it. And it's a beautiful helmet. So I just feel like it's iconic and it hasn't been utilized the way it should. Oh.
Yeah, I bought one of these Funko figures. Can you see it? Well,
I love it.
Yeah. And
I would buy one.
Oh, as soon as they had it as a pre-release, I ordered it straight away because the detail on him is fantastic, and he's got like a changeable head, so a figure that came out. And then I even took a photo of it and did a bit of photoshopping for the pack to have like flames coming out of it. Loved it so much. But you're right. When you look at it, when you look at his outfit, he's wearing flight pants. You know, the pants that they wore in them days for the what were they, GB flights, and his leather jacket. I would say that looked quite standard as well. But yeah, you're right. The helmet, such an iconic design, and the backpack. Now, the rocket pack is very different from the comic book version. The comic book version was just like one rocket in the middle, and if you like when I said about the King of the Rocket Men, that was very, very similar, but it was like a mix between the two. So that's why I thought it was a sequel or a remake of the King of the Rocket Man, because just imagine the comic book pack. So it's like one little rocket. Then King of the Rocket Men had two of those little rockets, and then the jetpack that was designed for this is like a more modern for that time retelling of the two rockets. You know what I mean? The design of the rocket pack is so good. I've thought about 3D printing one, to tell the truth, so I could have one on my wall. I would do it if I could. I'm looking at some pictures right now of what you said. I think that the rocket is just, it's so sleek. Like, it just has a beautiful sleekness of itself that just makes it look, it makes it look like anything else you haven't seen something just like it. Yeah. I love in the film, where they're trying to hide it and they use a vacuum cleaner and the person thinks that they have the rocket. It's a vacuum cleaner. Yeah. That was cracking. But even the design of it on when you think, would he burn his bum with the flames coming out? But no, he wouldn't, because they even designed like a little guard to direct the flames away from his butt. You know what I mean? Yeah, I feel like there's so much that went into like the idea of the Rocketeer, of like as far as like they talk about
the helmet is the rudder, your head is the rudder instead of the back part. And I love, like you pointed out, the Art Deco, like the poster, like the poster I always remember first is like from the side of him flying up, and it's summer of '91, and it's a drawing, like it's an old Art Deco style drawing poster, and it just has that. I feel like it's so much of we don't see it, and we'll get into how we feel about what it would look like in a reboot. But watching that film, it holds up. I think the time period really helps with with it holding up. But it's practical.
Yeah.
And I miss that so much in movies. As an older movie fan, my kids will watch a movie and they haven't got to the point yet where they know everything, like, oh, that's CG, or they did that with this computer or whatever.
I'm just looking myself at some of the various posters and artwork for the Rocketeer, and not talking about the comic book. We're talking about the posters for the film, and all of them were Art Deco. Literally, all of them were Art Deco shots, and that one where you see him flying sideways, that's on the soundtrack. And I have to say, as soon as I saw the film, I went straight down to the record shop and bought the soundtrack because I wanted it so much. The
score is amazing. They just re-released a remastered version on Apple Music, and I got it because it's Silvestri, isn't it?
Yeah, Alan Silvestri.
Let me double.
No, sorry, James Horner.
Yes, I knew it was one of the big ones. I had to think. James Horner. Yep. And like I said, I got the remastered, and it has that. It's hard to see because the reflection.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still the same cover. I mean, it's one of the. To me, it's a classic score. It's almost a theme that has gotten lost, but should have never been lost.
Yeah, I agree on that.
It's a very classic, rich, textured theme. So real quick, we're going to hit a note before we jump into our pitches. In 2019, I believe, this is weird, but Disney Junior, I have to bring this up because Disney Junior in 2019 did a TV series called The Rocketeer. And it is about a little girl named Kit. And it's technically Cliff's great-granddaughter who becomes the Rocketeer. I think the premise is cool as far as that. But other than that, like it's Disney Junior, first of all. So I'm not going to hate on it. It is a weird choice for Disney Junior. But what's crazy and what sucks about it the most, my daughter absolutely loves it. I mean, she loves it to the point where I took two 2-liter bottles, like Coke bottles, and I put some duct tape on them and put it to a backpack. I made her a rocket pack. I got her like a bike helmet with goggles to be her kit helmet. She had a pink jacket, and found some, like, I made her a whole kit kind of cosplay just with like stuff around the house. She loved it. She loves the show. She loved the Rocketeer. So when she found it, that's what actually helped me get my kids to sit down. We had family night and watch the original Rocketeer.
Yeah.
And so I think it's great because it gave her a sense of the show. But what I hate is it's a weird property for Disney Junior because it's already an existing property.
Yeah.
And it's like the one property of theirs that they kind of did one season, they're done, and they made no merch for.
Yeah, none.
So of course, the one thing that my daughter loves, like she didn't get into Vampirina or Puppy Dog Pals. So all the ones that I can go buy merch for and shirts and everything is not what she likes. She likes the one property that I have nothing to get for her. So I don't hate this show, but I just feel like there was something more that could be done with this property than this.
Yeah, agree.
But it's great for kids. I think it's a cool show. Like when you have kids, you'll watch it through different eyes and appreciate things like, okay, So I appreciate the show for what it is for my daughter. If I didn't have my kids and this is what it was, I'd be bummed out because I'm like, the Rocketeer property deserves more.
Yes, I'll totally 100% agree with you. But I watched a couple of episodes with my son, and he's not the age for it. He's 12. He ain't for it, and I wanted to watch it because it is technically canon to the property. And when they brought out the helmet, because they got the iconic helmet in, which I'm glad they kept. It's slightly changed because it's got a smile on the helmet instead of
it's a straight face.
Yeah, it's got a grin on it, and I thought, oh, that's a bit strange, but it's not made for me. It's not made for you. It's made for the little ones. And if that series helps them watch the original, then by all means, absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
I agree.
But for us fans. No, yeah, it's a loss. It is a proper lost property, And like we said about the Shadow was a lost property when it's got an amazing Facebook group with thousands of members, same as the Rocketeer. There's fans out there that want these properties made for the big screen, and we can do it nowadays with the special effects. It's just that they just don't. They seem to be, want to make reboots. Well, we're talking about reboots, but they just want to do the same thing over and over and over again. It's like Groundhog Day, like with Pirates. I love the Pirates films, but it is like Groundhog Day. Bum, 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 bum. And like you say, Jungle Cruise. I'm no spoilers, but Jungle Cruise is just a retelling of a Pirates of the Caribbean. It is. They should have named it Pirates of the Caribbean Jungle Cruise because it's like a proper spin-off. And you will sit there going, hey, this is Pirates of the Caribbean, even though it's like they've also lifted the story off the Mummy as well. It's two properties in one. Well, that's going off on one. But yeah, saying that, it's a very good movie, and I enjoyed it a lot. But let's try something different. The Rocketeer is a fantastic property, and it's got legs, or should we say, boosters. You could do a trilogy of the Rocketeer films if you got the right premise, the right actor, the right director, the right score, which we all had in 1991. Yeah,
I completely agree. And they just It's weird because I feel like after Star Wars, the movie game changed. The idea of franchising became bigger, and it was more of a conscious idea in movie making.
Yeah.
Because until Star Wars, and don't quote me on this, but there wasn't a lot of sequel driven properties. I can't really think of anything that had I always go back to, people forget, we talked about this at the very beginning, the Universal Monsters was the first connected universe.
Oh, yeah.
They did sequels and spin-offs that were sometimes loose, but there was connectivity there.
Yeah. Even the Abbott and Costello.
Yes.
They had, and I had recently downloaded them and watched them. Totally enjoyed them, but they are connected to the Universal Monster. This was that dark universe they tried to sell. Well, why sell it? We already had it.
Yeah.
You had it. You didn't have to rebrand it. You've got it.
That was the one that I showed my kids first because they were like, oh, I want to see this. And I was like, okay, it's fun, it's lighthearted, and it has all of the monsters in it, but the creature from the Black Lagoon, which somehow is my son's favorite. He's obsessed with anything reptilian. Okay? He loves Godzilla, his favorite Spider-Man villain is the Lizard, favorite Batman villain is Killer Croc. So if you see some patterns there, very prevalent. So jumping back to the Rocketeer, it's owned by Disney.
Yeah.
So, I hate throwing around this term because I feel like that's what everybody defaults to is, just put it on, make it a Netflix series, make it a HBO Max series. But honestly, this could be a Disney Plus series.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If they didn't want to go theatrically, it could be a great Disney Plus series, or even the budget. I feel like the budget they have allocated to even a Disney Plus original movie, if they want to keep it a little bit smaller, because I feel like it is a story you can do small. Like this, Cliff Secord isn't like stopping the invasion of New York here. The story can be small. I always go back to, my favorite ideas. The movie is good, but I always like the fact that The Wolverine was a very small film. It was Wolverine saving one girl in a small location. It wasn't world-changing stakes.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't him globe-trotting. It was a very small, personal film. And I think The Rocketeer in a lot of ways falls into that. So let's go ahead and kind of talk and pitch what you would do with the property if you were in charge of Disney's like, Jamie, here's this property. We want something new with it. What do we do?
Right. Disney came to me and said, Jamie, have you got any ideas? We've got this problem, The Rocketeer, have you heard it? I'd be like, Rocketeer? Yeah, absolutely. What would you like to know? Film or TV series? I would say TV series. Because at the moment, TV series, it's not the same as it was 20, 30 years ago, where all your major stars thought, I ain't doing TV. Now they all wanted to do, because you are getting film quality TV series, then you get films. You know what I mean? So I would go straight down with the Disney Plus series. Do it, 8 episodes, nothing too long. Good set. Good 8 hours, and I would set it as a sort of a sequel. I wouldn't do a reboot. I'll do it as a proper sequel. That basically Cliff Secord, he's still racing. It is now a couple of years later. The war is sort of on its wind down, you could say. And his partner in crime, what's his name? Alan Arkin played him. Peavy, that's it.
Peabody.
Right. He is actually developed another rocket pack. And he was keeping it as in should we use it or should we not? And Clifford finds it and he goes, I didn't know you was doing it. And he goes, well, I've been trying to tell you about it, but you're just not listening. And he goes, well, is it safe? And he goes, well, could be, might not be. It's a test, isn't it? I've got the original schematics. And technically, he did break down that original backpack, the original rocket pack, and he spoke to the original creator about it. He knows the ins and outs of it. And he did say right at the end of the original Rocketeer, and he goes, hey, you know what? I think we can make it better. You know what I mean? So he has done. Then Clifford finds out that something very seriously is going on. And then somebody turns up to tell him, I like the aspect of an alternative history. And we are talking sort of comic book, so we can go down the line of maybe somebody turns up that shouldn't be there in this timeline, maybe. And it tells him that, that Germany has taken over the world. And he's like, what? And they don't believe this guy. What are you talking about? And he shows him what, some kind of a film of what's happened. And he's like, well, how can we change this? And he says, there's an experiment going on in Nazi Germany, right? That is, if it carries on and it works, that's the end of it. You know what I mean? There's no more freedom. That's the end. And he's like, but I'm just a GB pilot. What can I do? And he goes, no, you're not just a GB pilot. You are the Rocketeer. Look at these papers, these newspapers. There's kids running around still dressed as you, running around. You are a figure, right? And this guy tells him that PD's got a project. So he goes to PD and he says he sees it and he tells him more. So he gets this rocket pack out and he tests it and it works fantastic. A little bit, you get your comic moments where he's testing it, and it goes good. And he goes, well, I just need the helmet. And he goes, well, I've made that as well. And he pulls that, he opens the cup and he pulls out the helmet. You know what I mean? He goes, the FBI gave him the helmet back. And what's it take the helmet? Let's just say for the purposes that the helmet was damaged and he brings it out because that reveal would be fantastic. So it brings out the helmet. Now, there's two stories that I'm really, really fascinated with in history. Technically, they happened, maybe, right? There was one with the invasion. They reckon it was like a UFO invasion in New York. Oh, no, Los Angeles. Yeah? Do you remember? Do you know about the story? There was like the famous, really old photo of what the shooting bullets at it, but they reckon it was a flying saucer. But I'm also love the idea of the Nazi bell, yeah, the so-called Nazi flying machine, the UFO stuff. Now, imagine you put all that together. That what Hitler was like for getting artifacts and stuff like. Not only is Indiana Jones looking for stuff like this, but the Nazis were in real life looking for stuff like this. So they get Seacord's right. Seacord's got the backpack. He's got it. He gets shipped into Germany by the FBI or the CIA, for the secret mission. He meets up with some operatives there, and they find out that the Germans are operating this bell, right? But the thing is, in the original rocket pack, there was a component that wasn't really built by the legendary, can't remember his name. Sorry?
Howard Hughes?
Howard Hughes, yeah. It was actually something else that he didn't build. He worked from, that he was given by the US government, yeah? And when the FBI recovered this, the bumbling FBI just said to people, yeah, you can have it. It's just wreck. So when he took it apart, he found this bit and he thought, well, that's strange. What is this? It was a weird component. It didn't look like anything they had any seen back then, but by putting two wires to it, it created sort of like a little bit of an anti-gravity maybe or something. So using that, he created the backpack. But it was all a ruse. The Germans wanted this backpack. They wanted it to be taken to Germany. So basically, Clifford went there. They managed to get his backpack. They ripped it open, got this rocket pack, and they got this component out. So then it was a mad rush to get that component back, put it back in the rocket pack, and escape with his life because they need it, because maybe it's alien technology. Maybe it's technology from another dimension. So he gets it, and of course, he flies around but the Nazis have not been sitting on their asses. They have got plans. Even though they had rocket packs that were failed experiments, they still had some that could work. You know what I mean? So you've got these massive chase scenes of Rocket Man on Rocket Man flying around. Well, you get the gist of it. Yeah.
All right. Who would you pitch for director?
Right. Right. Now, I'm a big fan of Joe Johnston, right? He directed the original. He's the guy that came up with Boba Fett. You know what I mean? Don't believe anything people say about Boba Fett that Dave Filoni came with. No, it was Joe Johnston. Joe Johnston designed him, right? And I think bring Joe Johnston back. I think he made a fantastic original. Why not get him back for the sequel? Get him back, right? And of course James Horner has passed away, so you can't have that same score. But there's plenty of people out there that can do the same similar score, like Brian Taylor. He does some fantastic follow-on films where he's used the original score, but did his own little mix of it. Because sorry.
I was going to point to, look at what Michael Giacchino did with Jurassic World, where he incorporated Williams' Jurassic Park. But also, I would think that John Ottman gets overlooked for how well he incorporated Williams' score in Superman Returns.
Oh, my God,
and then did his own score.
Yeah. I love that score. I absolutely love that score. If I've got that on a playlist.
Something like that, yeah.
I go to that quite a lot. Yeah, why not? Let's have him. You know what I mean? There's plenty of people that can do that kind of score and then make it great. But I want something that's, that's rolling, that gets you pumped. And with today's special effects, imagine the speeder bike the speeder bike on Return of the Jedi chase scene through the woods. Imagine if, you're going through not in the sky, but imagine if you're using a backpack, a rocket pack chase through trees. You know what I mean? Through the forest, he goes down and they're chasing him, and there's a lot of fighting, a lot of proper Indianas fighting, you know what I mean? But to get this technology, you know what I mean? To stop this technology, because if it's the balance of the future, you know what I mean? It'd be amazing. And, Jennifer Connelly back then in that dress, wow. She looked fantastic now, to tell the truth. Yeah.
So, I was also thinking about, the scene in Man of Steel where, like, the camera is kind of behind Superman as he punches Zod as he's flying. That kind of angle where the camera is not really behind the Rocketeer or in front, but, like, kind of on their back, so you're, like, with them.
Yes.
So, like, you're... So here's my idea. And I kind of, like, I'm torn between two thoughts. And where I'm torn is, one, I like the idea for a sequel. But at the same time, that means I have to recast, because I don't want to do like Bill Campbell now and do it set like 30 years later. No. And that's like what you just said about Jennifer Connelly. It's like, I wish I could keep the real cast, but I can't. So either way I'm going to go, I'm kind of rebooting my Cliff.
Okay.
I got to find a new actor for Cliff. So here's my thought. First one, I'll give you my pitch for a sequel, but I do want to point out, I think I hate when we reboot stuff, but this property I think could get a reboot and be done right. You still set it at the same time period, but you plan it and you plot it with the idea of taking it to the next level and expanding the property. Because I feel like you could do a lot with the property if you wanted to do, like, if you reboot it clean and you bring back Joe Johnson. No matter what you do, you bring back Joe Johnson, either to direct or produce. Because I feel like he, his most recent work that a lot of people will go to is he did Captain America: The First Avenger.
Yeah.
Which I think is a great movie, except one thing I don't like about it. And I'll say it real quick. I hate that. So Steve, as Captain America, his takedown of Hydra was in montage. And we never really got that as a film, or haven't went back to those type of events in anything else in Marvel really well. We've alluded to these things that he did, taking down Hydra, but that in the film itself is a montage of just him and Bucky taking down and the Howling Commandos. Yeah. Now, if we had went back in another film, and told those stories, great. But I feel like that's the one weak part of that movie. I think Joe Johnson 1 gets a bad rep for Jurassic Park 3. But if you look at it straight from a directing point of view, he did a great job. Yeah. He made an action-adventure film. There was a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that was wrong with that movie, with story, script that the studio was meddling with that kept changing on them. So, and then the same thing with The Wolfman. He was brought in at the last minute to direct. And I feel like that's kind of become his thing is, man, we need a director who's like a workhorse director who can get this done. Yeah. Who knows what they're doing. Bring in Joe. Because I think that's what he did on the Nutcracker and the Four Realms or whatever. The first director was let go. Yeah. Joe was brought in. He finished it and did some reshoots for it. So I really feel like he's become that guy. Almost the way. And it kind of bums me out that they haven't gone to Joe for one of these new Star Wars properties. Yeah. Because I feel like, Solo, when they had that whole conundrum, they brought in Ron Howard, which is great. But I feel like Joe might have been the guy to bring in for crafting a Star Wars film for the new era, because of his history with Lucas, because of his history with The Empire Strikes Back. So anyways, you bring Joe back, period. If you do a reboot, you keep it set in the time period, because the time period really locks in the story. Yeah. That Art Deco, that golden age. So I'm okay with a reboot if you do it like that. Now, my sequel pitch. So my pitch would be, it takes place a little bit after the first film. The war is over.
Mm-hmm.
We've defeated the great bad guy. Okay, that's one theme. Is now who is our villain? Cliff is still he's still the pilot. He is the Rocketeer, and he's doing kind of like odds and ends stuff, like saving people or whatever. Like kind of like how he saved the person at the stunt show and all that. He's still kind of doing that thing. He's kind of toned it down a little bit. He's racing. His airfield's taken off. He got some financial backing, for them to modernize from Hughes and stuff. So they're financially they're well off at the moment. Not rich because they're not trying to be lavish. Him and Ginny are together.
Yeah,
they're married and they have a baby daughter. Okay, I like that element because I like the idea of Cliff, who is this fearless pilot. He now has something to be afraid of. He now has fear introduced in himself. Before he was, he'd go on a plane, he'd climb on a plane. He had no fear. But now there's this element of, I don't want to die. I have fear because I want to be there for my daughter. So he's starting to have a little reserve that way. Now, I like the idea. If we bring back the Nazis, Nazis are like the best ultimate villain because nobody likes Nazis. And what you have is you have a pocket of Nazis that are actually trying to develop. They have a copy of some blueprint of the rocket from some point in time. They don't have the original or the final. That was actually made to make Cliff's. So they're developing their own new, basically they're trying to build up the campaign to relaunch the Nazis, their attack. Maybe we play around with Hitler's not dead yet kind of thing, like you said, I always think back about the opening of Hellboy, like you were talking about the Nazis and Rasputin and kind of that with the artifacts. Or Hitler is dead, but you have someone who's taken over and is even more devoted to that ideology. But anyways, you have the idea that the U.S. government, for some political reason, can't get involved yet. There hear rumors about this, but they've signed these the war is over because it's a division that's not sanctioned by the government. It's a Nazi group, not German, actual denouncing all country Nazi. That's their, and so Cliff almost gets recruited or this kind of thing because they're using. You could even have they're using Peavy's invention, or they've actually got Peavy's blueprint somehow, and now they're trying to mass produce it. So what they feared in the first film, so Cliff is I have to stop this because this technology, kind of the Iron Man theme of this technology is ours. It's safe in our hands. But let's go stop it. And you could have this kind of road trip movie, kind of like Indiana Jones 3 of Cliff and Peavy over in Europe, kind of doing missions to go stop these Nazis that they're having their own rocket pack tests, and they're trying to create their basically evil Rocketeer. So you have the black, same kind of jacket, but a swastika on it, or even some sort of symbol similar to the swastika, because we don't actually want to put the swastika on it. If you've seen the most recent, one of the more recent Superman and Lois's episodes, they have a character that in the comics was more Nazi, but they use a similar kind of symbol instead of actually using the swastika, something like that. But then, so you have this kind of road trip type movie of them overseas, kind of out of their element. Cliff is, doing his rocketeering at the same time. Now he's a little bit more. We'll throw in maybe another character. We'll throw in a female who's actually an FBI agent, spy, CIA, who's kind of with them, helping them, and kind of like a Ilsa, good character. And very much adventure, and I love your idea of the rocket chase, but ground level through the woods, and just that pairing it with with Star Wars at the speeder bike, that just And that's what happened. That's kind of the idea. That's where we have Cliff.
I like yours more than mine. Right? Do you know, I would think about yours as you were going along there, John, right? I would say I would set it as a road trip to Argentina, because didn't the breakaway Nazis go to Argentina, and they reckon there is some communities up there in the hills that are full Nazis still. So that could be good. You know, when you think of the guns of Navarone, the base where the guns. Imagine something like that in Argentina. So you've got them going to that kind of place, and if you got that kind of base with the big slit where the guns coming out, but instead of the guns, you'd have the rockets coming out there. You know what I mean? Oh yeah.
I mean, I like the idea of like the government comes to Peavy and they're like, "Hey, we've discovered your plans have leaked. We're doing this mission." And Peavy and Cliff are like, "We're in." And the government's like, no, you're not trained for this. No, this is ours. If anyone's going to know this technology, how to stop it, what they need to build these things, whatever, it's me and Cliff. Like, this is ours. And, you get pushed back like, you guys aren't government agents. You're not fully trained. And then, of course, you have this kind of conflict with his wife, who's like, Cliff, you could die. And he's like, I understand, but I have to do this. And it's kind of this mentality of, is this my last big hurrah as the Rocketeer? Maybe, maybe not. And then the theme of like, am I the Rocketeer because of the jetpack?
Yeah.
Or is it because of me?
Yeah.
And they're all themes we've played around in other movies, but
most definitely. But I would, if I was bouncing off your idea, it'll get to a point where he would make a decision where you think, I'm not going. My family mean more to me than this. Yeah. Even though he knows it could be a bad idea, but he thinks he's doing the right idea. And then similar thing to like what happened in Avengers Endgame, maybe not Endgame, Infinity War, where he sits down with his daughter and his daughter turns around to him and says, "Isn't it about time you saved the world, Dad?" You know what I mean? And then he went, "Yeah, you're right." And then that's when he went, you know what I mean? When he got the okay from his daughter to go, then he was like, okay, I'm going to do it. Because he could see that if he didn't go, it was her future that was in danger, not his. So he was doing it for her.
I like the idea of playing with, like, the good guys have won. The bad guys are defeated. There's no bad guys anymore. The world is at peace. The war is over. And then, the governments are like, nah, we got them all. Like, there's no – that's just people talk. And it's like, no, like, that should be really investigating, but there's no effort to actually looking into it. So you have this person who's almost taking it upon themselves to really, like, I'm going to stop this. And taking themselves out of their element and keeping it, like I said, just in that right after World War II. You're still in the 40s. You're still vibing with so much stuff that worked in the first film. But at the same time, because years ago they took the Phantom, and Sci-Fi Channel did like a movie for Sci-Fi, which was supposed to be a modernization of the Phantom. Yeah. And I feel like when you try to set it in modern day too often, it feels cliche because you always try to do what's hip, what's now at that moment.
Yeah.
So a few years later, when you go back to it, it feels bleh, because it's like you made it too much about the modern day and not just take the what worked and put it in modern day. You made it about it being in modern day. And I think the Rocketeer works best when it has that classic Art Deco pulp.
Yeah.
For a better feel.
Do you know who I would also put as maybe a bad guy, or somebody that you think is a really good guy, but turns out to be like a double agent, similar to what's the name from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade? Elsa. I would have his girlfriend from the comic book, Betty Page. You know what I mean? Like a rival.
I would see if I actually was going to like write the script, flesh this out, I would dive back into the comics more to dig that mine. Casting wise, like I know he always gets the bad guy, but one of my bad guys, Jason Isaacs for sure. Just a man is just amazing as a villain.
Oh, gotcha.
And if I couldn't get Joe to direct, my next director is Brad Bird. I think he got a bad rep when he did Tomorrowland, and that was a studio kind of intervention. But you look at Iron Giant, and then you look at the Mission Impossible 4 he did.
Yeah.
Those are solid films, and I think he has that also. He's from that same era as Joe, where he came up with certain things, and he's modern enough, but classic enough.
Yeah, and
that's what I want for this property.
He's a big fan of the Rocketeer because he actually used the rocket in Tomorrowland.
Exactly. So I feel like that. Those are my two for directing. Would be Joe if he doesn't come back. Brad Bird is my second.
Yeah,
he has that. Street cred, like the Iron Giant is animated, but it is a great and wonderful film that hits on some of these times and these themes, and I think those two together would make an amazing Rocketeer.
Don't be surprised if they do a live action of the Iron Giant, because the Iron Giant seems to be popping up in an awful lot of things lately.
You can't see it, but over on my shelf,
I can see it.
I think. Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see the silhouette. He's like.
Yeah, my wife got that for me because I love that movie.
I love the Iron
Giant. My
Giant.
Superman stuff.
That is one animation to live action I would really want to see. Yeah,
I agree. Because you could elevate the material and keep it. And my kids, because they love the scene in Space Jam: New Legacy where you see the Iron Giant run, and then Ready Player One.
Ready Player One.
That's going to wrap it up for us. I got to get going here. Got to take care of the kids. Any final thoughts? You want to plug anything? Social media? Anything people can find you, listen to you talk?
Yeah, sure. Right. You can. I run two podcasts. I run a Star Wars one, Radio Free Endor, and a Ghostbusters one, Ghost Heads UK. Now, my Radio Free Endor, you can go onto social networks and find me. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram at Radio Free Endor, and my email for Radio Free Endor is radiofreeendor@gmail.com. And now my Ghost Heads UK podcast. Again, I'm all over social network. I'm even actually on TikTok with the Ghost Heads UK. And you can find me at ghostheadsuk@gmail.com. I'm trying to remember. So many of them to remember. But again, I'm all over the social network. And you can find me as well on Facebook as Jamie Burns or Jamie_R_Burns on Twitter. But yeah, we're everywhere. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for being here today, Jamie. And you have a good one.
And you too. You take care.